It is 12:01, and in order to have sufficient time for our program today and to respect your time, we are going to go ahead and get started. Again, as I mentioned earlier, thank you for joining us as we celebrate Women's History Month 2023. The theme this month, as you have seen in our broadcast, is celebrating women who are telling our stories. My name is Laura Soria, and I work in the Office of Civil Rights as an Affirmative Employment Program Manager for the Department of Commerce. As we get started, and as I mentioned previously, please know that this event is being recorded. Closed captions were automatically enabled, but if for some technical reason they're not enabled in your computer or laptop, you can do so manually by clicking on the three dots at the top right of your screen and scroll down to enable them. American Sign Language services will be provided by Francisco Cisco Roman, one of my colleagues. He will be here for the introduction portion of today's program, but if you would like for him to continue to provide the service, please type your request in the chat, and Cisco will be sure to continue to provide ASL services. As you can see, we have turned off your cameras and microphones. This will just prevent interruptions during the presentation. As you know, it's being recorded, and hopefully it should help with our bandwidth. We will see. After today's presentation, there will be some time for Q&A. At that time, if you have a question, please raise your hand and I will unmute your microphone and camera if you select to turn it on. If you would rather type your question in the chat throughout the presentation, that's perfectly okay. What I will do is I'll read as many as I can towards the end of the presentation when we have the Q&A time. And now it is my pleasure to introduce you to ITA Senior Advisor to the Chief Financial and Administrative Officer and Deputy Undersecretary, Human Capital Executive, Ms. Laurie Monk. Today, she has graciously agreed to provide opening remarks. A little bit about Ms. Monk. She provides overall direction, guidance, and management advisory services on theories, philosophies, and principles of sound human capital management, controlling laws, directives, regulations, and policies. She is responsible for serving as a change agent to implement reforms to human capital talent management programs and process and accountability for the strategic alignment of ITA's workforce to its mission. Prior to joining ITA, Ms. Monk served as a Deputy Assistant Secretary for Management and Planning in the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights, where she was a principal advisor to the OCR's Assistant Secretary. In this capacity, she oversaw and directed all areas of planning, development, and implementation of budget, operational and administrative policies for OCR's 3 headquarter components and 12 regional offices. Her background that she brings in public service is with over 3 decades with the Department of Defense, where her service culminated as the personal advisor to the Assistant Secretary of the Army, Manpower and Reserve Affairs, and the Deputy Chief of Staff, G1. Ms. Monk has a degree in business administration with concentration in management from Strayer University and is a certified well development professional. She's a devoted wife and mother of 2, an avid reader of crime fiction novels, one of my favorite as well, and loves to travel. Ms. Monk, thank you so much for being with us today. Truly appreciate you spending some time with us and sharing our stories. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura, and thank you for that thoughtful introduction, and thanks for having me. It is my pleasure to join you this afternoon for the department's Women's History Month event. This year's Women's History Month theme, Women Who Tell Our Stories, is in recognition of women, past and present, who have been active in all forms of media and storytelling, including print, radio, TV, stage, the big screen, blogs, podcasts, and social media. Let me tell you my story. So my journey started over 30 years ago as a GS2. My story is one of perseverance and reaching goals despite many challenges and an uneven playing field. My story is filled with promises of a better tomorrow and dreams achieved. Thanks to the incredible women in my life, my story is still being written. Women at Commerce represent 43% of the workforce. They are physicists, meteorologists, economists, biologists, patent examiners, trade specialists, and statisticians. They are secretaries, undersecretaries, deputy undersecretaries, women who ensure the mission to create conditions for economic growth and prosperity comes to fruition. However, we recognize that here at the department and across our nation, women face inequality. As the grades go up, participation of women falls. Women are hired and promoted at lower rates than men. The gap in promotions is more pronounced for women of color. This is likely not an anomaly. Other federal agencies are facing the same challenges with women in the workforce. In this year's presidential proclamation for Women's History Month, President Biden reaffirmed his commitment to women by stating the following. We also reaffirm our commitment to advancing rights and opportunities for women and girls in the United States and around the world. We are mindful that we are building on the legacy of both recognized trailblazers and unsung heroines who have guided the course of American history and continue to shape its future. We at the department echo this view, and although we recognize we still have a long way to go, we are helping tell the stories. As the theme suggests, stories help us learn what has worked and what can work. Together, we can build a better and brighter future for all women. I'd like to encourage women today and every day to keep being who you are and breaking through all the barriers that marginalize you. I am here to reaffirm you are capable, you are worthy, and you are deserving. Understanding the triumphs of women from our past will truly help us understand our power to impact the present and the future. Today's presenter, Ina Petersen, founder and CEO of the women-led global media and entertainment company, Inner Voice Artists, has a story to tell. Ina is dedicated to providing women and underrepresented storytellers a voice across media, regardless of gender, color, ethnicity, language, nationality, sexual orientation, or religion. Her company is also a strong advocate for helping creators retain ownership of their intellectual properties and ensuring that they get compensated fairly for their work. Equal pay for equal work. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Ms. Ina Petersen.
Good afternoon, everyone, from rainy Los Angeles, or good morning for people that are joining from the West Coast. Thank you so much, Laurie, for the beautiful remarks, and thank you so much, Laura, as well, for helping organize today's event. So I'm going to be presenting a little bit today, trying to, in a small way, share my story, how I got my start, and basically how I ended up here. But before I jump into my presentation, I just want to take a few moments to say that I feel very honored and humbled to have been invited to speak at today's event, and an event I find to be incredibly important for so many different reasons. Again, thank you so much to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for having me, and to the organizers of this wonderful program for honoring the stories of those women who help create and give birth to what you see on screen every single day, bringing some of your favorite characters and storylines to life. As we know, it's been far from easy for us, but the sense of solidarity and warmth over the past couple of years within the community has encouraged us women to reach for new, exciting, roaring, and soaring heights. Thank you again for recognizing the importance of Women's History Month. It's one that's indeed very dear to my heart. First of all, I must admit that while preparing today's presentation, it suddenly dawned on me that I didn't have to do what I do every day while running this company, which is to sell, or what we call in the entertainment industry, to pitch an idea or a story. Today's presentation is different because it's not about selling or pitching, but instead it's about telling the story. Every one of us has a story, and today's story is about a young woman who set out with a dream, goal, and purpose in Hollywood, in an industry that still very much, even today, unfortunately, is a business dominated and run by men. And throughout the past 6 years, I have been steadfast on building something special and unique, which is a company and legacy that I believe is greater than me, and a company that stands for truth, authenticity, and purpose. My goal has always been to leave this industry better than the way I found it. Hence, I hope that today's presentation can hopefully inspire any woman to pursue her dreams and to never give up nor take no for an answer. No matter how hard it may at times seem, I promise you it will all be worth it in the end. And with that, I dedicate today's presentation to all the incredible and brilliant women who came before me, without whom I wouldn't be here today, as they carried, raised, and inspired me. I also dedicate it to the women who are here today watching this. I know you're out there every day fighting the good fight, paving the way forward for current and future generations, and for that, I'm eternally grateful. And lastly, I dedicated this presentation to future girls who will continue to carry on our legacies and inspire us with new innovations, art, ideas, and stories, leaving this beautiful, yet at times heartbreaking, planet we collectively share a better place than the way our ancestors and us found it. Thank you. I'm going to share the screen. Hopefully you can see it.
Yeah, it looks like it's loading.
Share slideshow. Can you see it?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I welcome you to Inner Voice Artist, which really is a company I started in 2017 as a young woman growing up in an industry, as mentioned, very much dominated by men. As I go into this presentation, I will tell you a little bit about how the company got its start, the vision, mission, and the values of the company, what inspires me every day. And there's a village of women, first of all, that inspire me every day, without whom, again, as I mentioned earlier, I wouldn't be here. This company wouldn't be here today if it weren't for these women. So I'm really excited to share the journey with you. So here we go, Inner Voice Artist. The world is global and the world is indeed female. As Laurie mentioned, Inner Voice Artist is a global media management, sales, event, and advisory company founded by myself and led by a team of multicultural women over the past couple of years, centered around inclusivity, equity, and diversity. And I want to mention this because it's so important. When we started this company, since day one, it's been about inclusivity, equity, and diversity. And this is going back to 2017. Before the pandemic, before the revolutions in between. For us, it was about the authentic purpose of creating something different, something unique that at the time, back in 2017, really didn't exist yet in Hollywood. So we decided to adopt a fresh, new blueprint that we believed was always going to have to be there. But again, nobody else seemed to really be doing it at the time. So we decided to jump in and just fill the gap, not just on a domestic level, but on a global level, regardless of, again, as mentioned, nationality, language, religion, background. Women from all over the world deserve to have their voices heard and their stories told. And as mentioned, our big focus is to help more women storytellers from, again, across the world and different cultural backgrounds get their voices heard and stories told. And it's been a battle. And I remember back in 2017, when we were pitching the premise for the company, having meetings with huge executives in Los Angeles and trying to explain what we were trying to do and our mission and our vision, and which was very much at the time still looked upon as, what are these little girls trying to do? What is it that they're trying to create? But I firmly believe that we were onto something very important, something that was bigger than all of us. And fast forward to 2023, we're seeing that women have definitely had a reckoning across industries in our country in particular, but also around the world. And we won't stand anymore for inequality, unequal pay, discrimination, sexual harassment, which is something I want to talk a little bit more about in the presentation as well, as we progress. So a little bit about me, my story. So I'm IVA's founder and CEO. My background, I grew up in a household with a lot of strong women. My mother was a very inspirational figure, this mathematician, very focused woman who would never take no for an answer and raised me to never take no for an answer, and to always know my value and my worth and stand my ground and speak up for the causes that I believed in, as well as my grandmother, who at the time had a PhD in chemistry in an era when, you know, women weren't necessarily going to college and getting diplomas. So I grew up with a team of inspirational women around me, and, you know, it helped frame my mindset and the way I wanted to pursue the things I wanted to do in my future, and create the change I wanted to see in the world. I grew up with a multilingual and multicultural background. I speak a lot of languages. I spent many years in Barcelona in Spain. I was going to be a professional tennis player. That's what my goal was since I was a very young girl. Traveled to Spain, grew up in a tennis academy where I practiced 15 hours of tennis every day until I was 17. Unfortunately, got an injury, had to stop playing when I was 17. But nevertheless, I was so fortunate to grow up on an academy and an international school where I was exposed to people from different countries, different cultures, different languages, which really, again, instilled in me very early on this importance of being multicultural, importance of thinking not just narrow-minded, but really broader and bigger, and just being exposed to these beautiful languages and beautiful people from all over the world. And again, going back to realizing that everyone has a story, everyone has something to say and something to share. When I got my injury when I was 17, what's next? I like to say I had my midlife crisis early, so at least that's out of the way. When your whole identity is framed around a sport, I'm sure a lot of professional athletes can, you know, agree with this and relate. So I decided to focus on my academics, which took me to Harvard in 2009, and I graduated with a degree in psychology and English literature in 2013. And then sort of just by happenstance, landed in this crazy industry called entertainment and media. I got an internship before I graduated to come to Los Angeles to work at Universal Studios, which at the time was definitely not in the cards. It was mind-blowing to me. I thought I was going to be a doctor and pursue a medical career straight out of college, as most of the people in my family did. But unfortunately, you know, life had different plans in store for me. I accepted the internship, which took me to Los Angeles. And as they say, the rest is history. Worked my way up, started in the agency world at a company called ICM Partners, which now was just recently acquired by Creative Artists Agency, which is the company, ironically, I ended up after ICM, where I was incredibly, incredibly fortunate to be exposed to amazing storytellers, getting to work with wonderful producers, writers, directors from different backgrounds from all over the country. But still at the time when I was there, this is 2013 going to 2017, the whole idea was still male focused, domestic focused. It wasn't still very global. It wasn't that women were coming front and center in terms of conversations that were being presented at staff meetings. It would always be the same 5 male names being circulated over and over again for roles, for scripts, for film, for television. And to me, that was a little frustrating because I wanted to see some fresh blood. I wanted to see directors, female directors that, you know, we hadn't really heard from. And there were so many of them. And going to film festivals and conferences and events, I knew that they were out there, and I was tracking lists. I kept, you know, researching and keeping my grids, as I would say, my Excel spreadsheets. And there were hundreds of names that I can find within a month of directors, female directors that were doing incredible things out there, but they were being overlooked because of, you know, the big male A-lister names, which, you know, in Hollywood being, you know, a very commercialized business, I understand, you know, it's important to make a return on investment, but at the same time, it's equally as important to provide new opportunities for women across this industry. So as you see, I was fortunate to work on some incredible projects: Moonlight, Brooklyn, Jackie, The Lobster, Ingrid Goes West. A lot of them had women front and center, such as Ingrid Goes West. That was an incredible film with the female character in the center of it. American Honey as well. Brooklyn too, which was nominated for Best Picture Oscar. Moonlight is very dear to my heart because it was one of the first LGBTQ plus stories with a African-American male in the center of it. It was one of those passion projects that we had 200 no's to get a yes, and we finally got it made, and obviously went on to winning Best Picture at the Oscars in 2016. And yeah, like I mentioned, I have always had my one foot in the world of creating opportunities for directors, writers, and actors, etc. But also my other foot has always been in the world of philanthropy and working in the nonprofit sector. And at CAI at the time, we had a foundation department, and which I was very much involved in, because I always thought, this is such a big conglomerate company. How can we do even more? How can we give back even more? So I started getting involved with their foundation department and helped them create a program called Take Action Refugee Program, which kind of spurred out of my thesis that I did in college on the HIV epidemic in sub-Saharan Africa, and how a lot of people, unfortunately, have to flee their countries in pursuit of better lives and better healthcare, and having access to education and information that they necessarily wouldn't have in their home countries. So I helped the company partner with the International Rescue Committee for that, which spurred into other opportunities as well on the film and television side, which leads me up to 2017. So from 2013, 2017, I was in the agency world. I was seeing the need for massive change. I was already pitching the need for a global department, a female-centered department. Again, very much still stuck in the Stone Age. Let's stick to what we know. Let's not yet, you know, go venture out doing things that people haven't really done before. So that's when I decided to take matters into my own hands in 2017, when I decided to move to New York City, which I always say is the mecca for everything and anything. If you want to start a company, do it in New York City, because that city has energy and it really keeps you on your toes, and it's really close to the world. So I always like to say New York City helped me get my company, because once I got to New York City, it was a process of pitching, not sleeping, working not 24 hours a day. If there were 48 hours in a day, I would be working, I would be hustling, I would be sleeping maybe an hour a day for two years straight. It was insane. I was going to film festivals, I was going to events, I was going to panels, I was researching clients to sign. I really wanted to focus on women clients, directors, female producers, female financiers, and again, from all over the world, not just the United States. And like I mentioned, there's so many of them. One just has to, you know, lift those rocks and find them, but they're out there. It just takes a little effort, but not impossible. So I decided to launch this company. It was time, Inner Voice Artists, with the blueprint of creating a company, again, that stood for inclusivity, diversity, equity. And again, with the huge focus of women. And you have to keep in mind, in 2017, when I started this company, I was on the heels of the Harvey Weinstein reckoning. So it was the Me Too era was about to burst out. So we were kind of going in parallel with what was happening, ironically enough, in my industry in terms of women finally speaking up, finally stating their ground, saying enough is enough. We're not going to stand for these things anymore. We're going to, you know, take matters into our own hands. So my mission and my vision and the values that I had for the company really became our driving force. And again, ironically, going hand in hand with the Me Too movement. But before I start diving more and more into the company, I just want to say that IDA was built on a foundation, strong foundation of women who came before me, women who are still with us today, and also women who will probably inspire me in like 40 years. So it's the past, the present, and the future. And the women who inspire me are the Oprah Winfreys of the world, the Michelle Obamas, the Jennifer Lopez's, the Reese Witherspoons, the Taylor Swifts, all women who have faced adversity in the sense that they've been told no one too many times. This can't be done. You can't do this. This has never been done. We have never seen this. When you're negotiating contracts, just as an example, with attorneys in media and entertainment, most of those lawyers are men, average age 60, and a lot of them are not privy to the advancements of technology. Technology is incredibly important because it's not going away anytime soon. It's only going to continue to increase. And with that being said, contracts need to be amended to understand that increase of technology. And this is when, you know, the Taylor Swifts of the world, to use her as an example, what she managed to do in the music industry for women, carving out a path for women to have an ownership right to their own master recordings. It's a thing that never existed before. And she was told it can't be done. But she re-recorded her entire catalog and negotiated her way into a new record label deal where she said, I'm not signing with this new label unless you give all the artists on your roster the entitled right to have a percentage of ownership to their own master recordings, which to me is really badass and hasn't been done before. So she was one of the first. Same goes with Jennifer Lopez. Jennifer Lopez is one of the first multi-hyphenate storytellers, performers, businesswomen in our industry at a time when you were considered to be just an actress or just a singer, quote unquote, being just, you know, she said, no, I can do it all. I can have my fragrance line. I can have my reality show. I can go on American Idol and host. I can have my clothing line. I can still do my films. I can still do my music, and I can still perform. When agents and managers were telling her, you shouldn't do American Idol. It probably wouldn't be great for your career. When she signed on to American Idol, it broke viewership records. So she was onto something. And also being, you know, a Latina woman, you know, it's as we know, it's not easy to be a woman and a woman of color and to really stand your ground and raise your voice. And then it turns out you were right all along. And then, of course, we have Reese, we have Malala, who became the youngest at 16 to be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, which she won, and hasn't stopped since then. And this year was even nominated for an Oscar for a short film that she did. Of course, Eleanor Roosevelt, the one and only, you know, who helped create the United Nations, stood for human rights. Oprah Winfrey, who back in the day when it was unheard of, decided to take a lower cut on her upfront fees when it came to her Oprah Winfrey show and said, instead of you giving me more money up front, why don't you give me ownership into my own television show? And that had never been done by a woman before Oprah. So Oprah really, again, broke so many barriers, so many grounds back in, you know, the late 80s, early 90s that were unheard of. So of course, you know, these women inspire me because they were groundbreakers and they didn't take no for an answer. And, you know, they kept going and, you know, fought the good fights and won and are carving out paths forward for future generations of women, you know, to do the same. Again, as I mentioned, you know, how the company got its start and just going back to re-examining 2017 just a little bit, which, like I said, I call it a year of reckoning for women in our stories in Hollywood. I'm not sure if it weren't for 2017, if we would have had the changes we have today within media and entertainment. In some ways, I find it so unfortunate that so many women had to suffer, you know, going through what happened, that all the stories that came out in 2017, but had they not come out, we wouldn't have had the reckoning that happened. So these are just some of the headline Variety magazine articles that came out around the time that you know, the 2017 reckoning was happening. And, you know, I can't tell you how many times, you know, women have been called difficult in our industry, and which, you know, you would never call a man difficult. You would call him the man. He's doing something right. But we're difficult because we ask for what we're legally entitled to, but we're met with opposition because we're women. What do quote unquote we know? So, of course, the conversations began about equal pay, about sexual harassment, about raising your voice, telling your story. Now I want to examine from here where we are today, which is really interesting because yesterday, actually, Variety came out with an article about Hollywood in the post-Me Too era and what changes have we seen? You know, coming out of 2017, going into 2019, there were some changes and, you know, the percentages increased, but not enough. And the article yesterday was talking about how that momentum has stalled for women in Hollywood. And, you know, it's always, you know, you're going to take 10 steps forward to take 5 steps back. We completely understand. But I have always been concerned with the idea of trends and the idea of fads. I personally don't like to go after trends or go after fads because they don't stick. How can we take something that's not supposed to be trendy? It's not supposed to be a fad. It's supposed to be a human right to have equal pay and to be considered equal in a society, you know, shared by both the male and the female species. So all of that to say, where we are today, we're at a break point. Using tennis analogy, of course, because when I negotiate contracts still to this day, there's always a tennis match back and forth. So here's a little statistics in terms of female directors, the gender ratios. So as you're seeing, this is from 2007 to 2022. In 2007, the male to female ratio was 97.3% towards males versus 2.7% towards females, which is unheard of. So most of the films that you saw on the big screen in 2007 were directed all by men. We saw even worse in 2008. It was 92% male versus 8% female. And then, you know, we go up to 2017, which is the year of reckoning. We were at 92.7% versus 7.3% male to female ratio, which is just staggering numbers. And of course, in 2018 doesn't really count because most of the movies that were already in post-production in 2017 came out in 2018, and they were still dominated by men. It was only in 2019 that we started seeing some changes when the males dipped to 89.3% and the women were at finally 10.7%, which is a significant increase, but of course not enough. And then 2020 came along, and then of course we went down with the men a little bit further, 85% for men and 15% towards female. But then, you know, this leveled out a little bit more in 2021. Of course, we had the pandemic too, but, you know, in the pandemic, it was also other things happening. So it was a little bit easier to forget that, you know, women, you know, we're still there. So of course the numbers went down a little bit again for women to 12.7% in 2021. And again, it rose for men again to 87.3% in 2021. Only in 2022 to go back to 91% for male and 9% to female, which means that where did we end up from 2018 to 2022, which means we've stagnated, which means the Variety's article yesterday was pretty much correct. We've stalled in terms of, you know, significant changes that we made in the past few years towards women have stalled again. And that can be blamed on a lot of different reasons. But again, you know, for me as somebody who's a champion of women to have the right to tell their stories, there's no excuses for this. This is unacceptable. And for, you know, agents to say, you know, well, it's getting better. Of course, the male agent will say it's getting better because they see whatever is being pitched to them every day on their desks, but they don't look at the numbers as a collective whole because it's just a commission to them at the end of the day. So the women directors 2007 to 2022, there's only honestly been, you can say almost a handful, 73 women directors in total between 2007 and 2022. And most of these women were big names. They started off as actresses before they became directors. So to me, this doesn't even really count because it's not taking account the female directors from overseas, the student film directors who are becoming now professional film directors. It's only taking into account the ones that, you know, the Jodie Fosters of the world or the Angelina Jolies of the world who we knew of before, you know, and of course they were giving shots to direct their first films because they already were established names. For me, you know, this is great, but how do we take this even further? How do we include new names, new blood, new female directors that so desperately need to have their voices seen and heard, especially women of color? So women of color directors from 2007 to 2022, there was only 16 out of 73, which to me is mind-boggling. I can name you 50 on the top of my head, female directors who are women of color right now, who should be directing a major studio film or a major studio TV show. For there only to be 16 out of 73 women directors who are women of color is inexcusable. So what are we doing wrong? How do we change this? You know, like I say, one person might ignite the flame, but it takes a whole realm to help see a significant change. So this is something that that agents, that studio executives, that us as a collective working in this industry really need to work together as a team. There's no I in team. We need to work together to help create these opportunities, especially for women of color, so that we don't get stuck on 16 when we can be, you know, in the way past the hundreds by now. These are the only female directors who have ever been nominated for Oscars. There's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them, and only 2 have won. Chloe Zhang and Catherine Bigelow was the first female director to ever win the Oscar for Best Female Director for Zero Dark 30 a couple of years ago. And then Chloe Zhang won for Nomadland. Only these women have ever been nominated for Best Director Oscar, which to me is fascinating. I can't really talk about, you know, my story and, you know, the story of women in Hollywood without mentioning the big 5 major studios, because they're still the most powerful ones to this day. You know, I always like to say there's the studio and there's the pockets of which the studios own. When I say pockets, I mean departments. There's the film department, there's a television department, there's a department for branding and endorsement, there's a department for everything. And all these different departments, they have heads. But I'm not looking for a department head. I'm looking for a corporate level head. Who's running the show? Who's the captain of the ship? Who's the Bob Iger of, you know, these studios from a female perspective, right? Universal, Sony, Warner Brothers, which is now Warner Brothers Discovery, Paramount, Lionsgate, Disney. None of these studios have a corporate leader, CEO, chairman who is a woman. They tried with a couple of women in the past, but unfortunately, you know, they were quickly replaced by men. It's so easy to point the finger if a film fails and it doesn't do well, or if, you know, stocks go down, you just blame it on the woman, for the mere sake really being a woman, because, you know, the stereotype is the man is stronger, the man is less emotional, the man is X, Y, and Z, which, you know, obviously is not an excuse again. But to me, to look at these numbers and look at these studios who have the most power in Hollywood, and to find that there's no women CEO and chairman within the corporate ladder is frightening. So you ask yourselves, why is it that we don't see more stories written and told by women for women across film and television? And I firmly believe that this is one of the reasons. Now, to just go back to Inner Voice Artists, I can't talk about this company without celebrating the team of brilliant women who helped build Inner Voice Artists, because it's not a company about me. It's a company that's greater than me. It's about the team. There's no I in team, as I always say. These women are champions of change. They helped build the company from ground up. So I really want to take a moment to recognize them and their achievements. As we see here, there's my COO, Diana, right there to the left, and my assistants and my interns and coordinators, really women who work 24/7 around the clock to achieve what we've achieved as a collective, as a team today. And of course, what are those achievements? Again, going from a company that was started out of the Me Too movement, going in parallel with the Me Too movement, a company of this kind that had never been done before, a company that had no starting capital, was self-funded when we launched the company in 2017. I was literally working out of my little shoebox apartment in New York City, like I said, not sleeping, sacrificing my personal life and everything in between to make sure that we were building something unique and something special. So some of those achievements from the ground up to where we are today are, as mentioned, IVA in 2017 was the first women-founded and women-led media company of its kind in Hollywood to launch with the more forward-thinking mindset, which placed a strong emphasis on the increase of global content and need for representation of underrepresented, multicultural, and multi-hyphenate content creators from across the globe. And unlike most other companies at the time, I can't stress it enough, IVA incorporated the importance of equity, inclusivity, and diversity early in its DNA blueprint, as well as recognizing the increasing interconnectedness of a global content and intellectual property via technology. Like I said, technology has changed the way we negotiate contracts. It's changed the way streamers operate. It's changed the way that storytellers and women get paid in our industry. Which is something that I'm a huge advocate for, equal pay all the way. And we really needed to emphasize back in the day the need to innovate and think outside of the box in what very much was a rapidly evolving global media and entertainment marketplace. Now, to really think outside of the box in the media industry, you have to be really careful because, again, people are stuck in their own ways. Changes don't get made easily. What you see in the news or in the media being presented to you, you see what's taken 10 years to bring to fruition. You see films, on the big screen that have taken some 30 years to bring into fruition. So really the changes are at a mice level slow. So we were the first company in Hollywood to adopt the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals model as our blueprint. The SDGs, there's 17 of them. They incorporate everything from women's rights to climate change activism to access to healthcare to LGBTQ plus rights to mental health awareness. For us, that was incredibly important. And when we were talking about this in 2017 to executives, most executives had never heard of this model, the SDG model, and it's always been there. It's been there for a while, and these are goals that we want to achieve by a certain point, as a collective. So for us, we fell in love with them, so we adopted them as our blueprint. Again, like I said, company startup stage was self-funded. We funded it with blood, sweat, and tears, working tirelessly around the clock and across multiple time zones, which to this day, Australia, I think I will never get because I still don't know. They're a day ahead and I always mess that time zone up. It's always going to have a special place in my heart. Melbourne has a different time zone from Sydney, so I'm still adjusting to those. But I'm all of that to say that really, when you're running a global company, you have to really take these things into consideration, that you're not just, working with the United States, you're working with a lot of different countries. You're almost operating like the UN of entertainment. In 5 years, IVA grew from 1 to 5 employees with the help of 100 plus global interns. I always say if it weren't for our interns, we wouldn't be here today. We've had incredible interns from so many different colleges, from NYU Tisch to Harvard to USC to UCLA, who really helped us, reading scripts, providing coverages, doing research, putting together grids. I have to take a moment to acknowledge those interns because any company, I started as an intern from the bottom up, worked my way up. Any company that doesn't take a time to acknowledge their interns, I think it's a shame because really they are the soul, as I would say, of the company. Since day one, our client roster at IVA has consistently maintained a 50-50 ratio of male to women, which is really important to me. I never looked at this since day one as a trend or a fad. This has always been something that I believed in 150%, and I never wanted it to go away. I never wanted to go away. I want us to continue this path forward. 60% of our clients are women of color. Again, that was completely unintentional. It's just I don't want to see the same name recycled over and over again. I want to create new opportunities for emerging storytellers, women of color who haven't been given the opportunity to have their voices heard or seen or even read as a preliminary pitch by executives or agents. So that's what I'm here to do. Clients from several countries and across 5 continents. So we represent clients in Europe, we represent clients in South America, in the United States. You name them, we've probably been in that country working with producers within that country, from Israel to India to, Italy. We've traveled the globe. IVA has advised on projects, sold and brokered deals for 100 plus film and television projects. In the pandemic, we just went go. I think we had about close to 1,000 Zooms in the pandemic where I was just pitching, aka selling my little heart out, making sure that these women were front and center in all of our stories, that we were selling their scripts and helping them tell their stories and putting them in front of development executives, studios, in Hollywood and programmers, just making sure that their scripts were sold and their voices were heard. We had broker deals for all the big players, Universal, Warner Brothers, Netflix, Hulu, Disney. Again, bringing them stories that they wouldn't necessarily have heard before. There's a lot of incredible scripts that I've read over the past couple of years that I'm just, wow, we've never seen this on screen before. And had you asked me 5 years ago if a studio would have purchased that particular script, and there's one in mind that I have, it's called My Big Fat Nigerian Wedding, which we just set up over at Universal. A Nigerian story with a Nigerian female character in the center of it, written by a Nigerian American woman 5 years ago? Never. So the fact that we managed to do that, set that project up, today at one of the major studios, to me is mind-boggling, and just a testament to you can do anything if you set your mind to it and never take no for an answer. We were the first company in Hollywood to also launch a social justice and human rights centered global youth content and music festival called Youth Monday. So this really came out of this idea of what I already had while I was working back in the agency world. How can we do more? I don't want to tweet. I don't want to Instagram. I don't want to talk. I want to walk the walk. I don't want to talk. Anybody can talk. But doing and taking a shovel and getting your hands dirty and digging, that's a whole different ballgame. So we decided to put together this festival that was really centered around social change and human rights, adopting again the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as our blueprint, a festival that we put together in less than 9 months on a skeleton crew of women, all organized by women. We picked 4 topics to focus on during our festival. It was climate change, women's rights, mental health awareness, and LGBTQ plus rights. So all the content at the festival, including the music performances, the film screenings, the panels, the exhibitions, were all filtered according to the themes of each day. So it was a four-day festival that we launched in Rome, Italy. And one of the reasons why we picked Italy and Rome was because the first International Youth Day, since it's a youth festival, was launched in 1989 by the UN in Italy. And that was a big success. And we had global youth ambassadors. We had our young ambassadors, some of them being women, hosting panels. We had indigenous people come from Brazil that, was the first time, going to a major event like this. And it was just so special and so inspiring to see these young people raise their voices and speak up for the greater good and help them tell their stories, raise their voices, because everyone has a story again. I keep coming back to that, including, doesn't matter if you're 100 years old or if you're 13 years old and you're the Greta Thunbergs of the world sitting in front of Parliament, hoping for positive change, we're here to, again, elevate those stories. So with that, because we couldn't do, another festival in the pandemic, everything went Zoom and virtual, we decided to, okay, how can we supplement this? Because there was a huge need. Young people wanted another festival, but we couldn't provide them with the young festival. So we decided to launch this thing called the Global Spotlight Series / magazine, where we've now published over 300 articles. And all of the articles and the interviews that we've had in our magazine Spotlight has all been people who are using their voices to speak up for the greater good. So people across small businesses, directors, writers, producers, musicians, small business owners, women. We've interviewed them, helping them tell their stories. All those articles are up on our website at innervoiceartist.com. And if you read them, again, goes back to that, them sharing their stories and how their works, the purpose of their works is to help, make the world a better place. And then this brings me to one of my last achievement point, which is, when you're working and building from day one, especially as a woman, you have to work 10 times as harder than a man. I think that's one of the reasons why I use the word sacrifice. We shouldn't have to sacrifice. Women shouldn't have to sacrifice their personal lives to achieve certain success. I say that I did because that's the way I felt when I was starting the company, because, we were starting from scratch. We were starting self-funded. I had to work 20 times harder, I feel like, to make sure that this was brought to fruition and that this was going to be successful. And we were going to create this positive change that we set out to do. So when you're in this bubble working 24/7, you don't stop to realize what you're achieving while you're in the midst of it. It's only when you take a step back and when you step outside of the bubble that you start realizing, holy moly, we did this. We actually did this. Which brings me to the last point. We just recently underwent a multi-million-dollar valuation by one of the world's largest investment companies, Blackstone, in New York City, which, had you told me that we would have achieved that, 6 years ago. I would have told you, get out of here. No way. It was not my focus. It was not my plan. I genuinely set out with the passion, with the strong purpose. I never set out to be valued by a Wall Street company, but we did, which is just a testament again to us women, what we managed to build over the past couple of years collectively as a team. It's exceeding all my wildest expectations. So I'm really proud of us, to say the least. And this, again, just to talk a little bit about Youth Mundus, this is our, music and content festival that we launched, that I mentioned in Italy. That was a big success. This is Youth Mundus's mantra: speak up, share your story, tell your story. Women, young girls alike, future, present, current. Youth Mundus's mantra is really no more climate change and environmental degradation, no more irresponsible production and consumption, no more exploitation of youth's rights and safety, no more exploitation of women's rights and safety. Thank you very much. No more unequal representation. Thank you very much. No more mental health stigmatization, no more social, economic, and political inequalities, and no more violation of access to food, water, health, and education. This is our festival's mantra. This is the Global Spotlight Series magazine, as I mentioned, with over 300 inspiring articles published. The quote is, art has the power to transform, to illuminate, to educate, inspire, and motivate. And again, it was launched as a pad to advocate for underrepresented voices and stories from around the globe, to help them tell their stories. These are some of the women that we've interviewed over the years, and, who are doing amazing things within their respective fields. Okay, what's next? What's next is that we have to continue to carve a path forward. We have to continue to create these positive steps in the right direction. We need more Angela Bassett's. We need more Ariana DeBose's. We need more Michaela Coles. We need more Michelle Yeoh's. We need more of these women who really broke records. Angela Bassett was the first woman nominated for an Oscar this year for a Marvel movie for Best Supporting Actress. Ariana DeBose was the first female openly, LGBTQ plus Latina to win a supporting Oscar last year. Michelle Yeoh became the first Southeastern Asian woman to win the Oscar for Best Actress this year. Michaela Cole did something revolutionary with her Emmy Award-winning show, I May Destroy You, where she said no to Netflix and yes to HBO because they agreed to give her a percentage ownership in her own show, which is unheard of. Kind of reminds me of what Taylor Swift has been doing in the music industry. So when people say it can be done, yes, it can, but we have to work as a team, as a collective, to carve the path forward. These are also the films that, the international films and television shows that broke records at the Oscars. Again, one of the reasons we started this company. In 2019, the film Parasite makes history because it was the first non-English language film to win Best Picture. When I was saying this in 2016, I remember that the future was global. It was interconnected. People were looking at me like I had 10 heads. When Parasite won that Oscar, I can't tell you how many people came to me and said, Ina, so how does one go about launching a global media and entertainment company? Because the future is no longer global. The global is the here and now. And if we think just narrowly, we're going to be left behind. So I'm so happy when that film won the Parasite, just proving, that we were onto something from the beginning. We weren't completely crazy. And then, of course, you have a foreign film, The Worst Person in the World, with what many people consider a flawed female character protagonist in the center of it, but she's not flawed. She's imperfectly perfect. If you haven't seen this movie, I highly recommend watching it. As a woman, it's incredible. It was nominated for Best Original Screenplay, and this was a foreign film being nominated for Best Original Screenplay, foreign language, in the same category as an American movie, which to me is like, again, just comes to prove our points where we are in the industry. And again, we were onto something. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Did I even have to mention this film? Won 7 Academy Awards this year with a strong female protagonist in the center of it. Most of the cast was international, by the way. Take Jamie Lee out of the equation, who's amazing. But most of this cast was international. And it was a woman in the center of it who also was a woman of color and ended up winning an Oscar. And this film broke a lot of records. So kudos. And lastly, age is just a number for women. I can't tell you how many times when a role gets presented to a woman in Hollywood, oh, she's too old, or she's too this, she's too that. We don't say that about men. We don't say about, with all due respect, Daniel Craig is just to this, he's just to that. But a woman, we do. No, age is just a number. And I can prove that The book club is now a franchise. The sequel is coming out. Look at these wonderful women, from Jane Fonda to Candice Bergen to Diane Keaton. They're slaying it at the box office. They have a franchise from the first book club to the second book club. Grace and Frankie, believe it or not, longest running television show on Netflix. Most shows on Netflix get canceled within 5 seasons, if they even make it to 5 seasons. This show went on for 7 seasons. It was the #1 show. 2 women, older women, in the center of it. So when you tell me that people don't want content, specifically curated for older women, that's a bunch of baloney. Same with 80 for Brady, the little film that could. Look at that. It made a lot of ka-ching at the box office. These women still have it. And of course, we have Fast and the Furious coming out. I had to post this picture of Helen Mirren and Vin Diesel. Helen's still slaying away, in a big, huge action-packed film with, Vin Diesel next to her. Just comes to show, hey, age is just a number. It doesn't mean anything. It's just an excuse, for women not to be taken seriously and, compensated fairly for the work that they do. So I'm so happy to see these things come to light slowly but surely. And lastly, as I mentioned earlier, how do we continue this positive change? I'm one person, I have one company. As much as I want to help everyone, we need to inspire others as well to join in on the good fight. But I think, honestly, the way we can see more proactive change is from the studio level, because that's still the most powerful model in Hollywood. It's not the streamers, it's the studios that control all these IPs and big franchises, etc. We really need to see these positive changes. They need to be steady, they need to be consistent, and they need to be long lasting. We need more women chairmen and CEOs in corporate leadership. And I'm not talking about pockets and divisions and department heads. I'm talking about corporate leadership positions across the media industry. I'm talking the people that are going to steer the entire Comcast ship, the women that are going to steer the entire Discovery Warner Brothers ship, the women that are going to steer the entire Disney Studios ship, not just pockets of it, but the entire ship and all the little divisions combined. Because this will only help strengthen our voices, as we will then have a stronger say when it comes to fairly appointing more women into senior leadership roles. It's a trickling down effect. And this will ultimately, like I said, trickle down to the film and television content being produced. So when we have power, when we have a say from here, it'll trickle down to everything else and the people that we appoint to certain positions, which will then, trickle down to the content being produced and the film and television shows and the podcast being created. When more male executives from across company divisions start reporting directly to us women at a corporate leadership level, then we will be in much stronger positions to move the needle forward on which projects get greenlit. And we need these women from all backgrounds, from all different ethnicities, from all different walks of life across the big 5 major studios. These women have stories to share. They have experience to add. They have value. They have worth. And unfortunately, this is an industry still that continues to be dominated by men. And the studios continue to remain the most powerful to this day. So we really need more women appointed in these corporate leadership positions if we're going to see this long-lasting, consistent, stable change, which is what Variety yesterday said has unfortunately stalled for women in Hollywood. So we just have to keep fighting the good fight. We have to work together. And that's not to say, don't take men out of the equation. We have to work with men. We have to all work together as a team, men, female, whatever, to create these long-lasting positive changes. And I want to leave with this really inspiring quote. Michelle Obama is one of my favorite ladies of all time. She's so inspirational to me on so many different levels. She said, the arts are not just a nice thing to have or to do if there is free time or if one can afford it. Rather, paintings and poetry, music and fashion, design and dialogue, they all define who we are as a people and provide an account of our history for the next generation. So with that being said, stories are powerful. They have the power to change people's lives. They certainly have changed mine in so many different ways. I consider myself incredibly humble and lucky to do what I do for a living, but even luckier that I get to work with so many inspirational women on a day-to-day basis who trust me to help tell their stories. Like I always say, they write the scripts, I sell, but it goes 50-50. It goes in tangent. You know, we lift each other up. They inspire me with their stories, because if I'm not inspired by the stories, how can I sell the story? You know, and these women that I work with on a day-to-day basis, and the ones that I will probably work with in the future, they just lift me up and make me a stronger CEO. Like I always say, I'm not perfect. There's always room for improvement. I'm learning as I go. You know, I always say I'm a businesswoman. I'm a CEO. I'm a woman. I'm also a content creator of my own kind as well. You know, I created a festival. I created a Spotlight magazine. I created a company, which in a way makes me a content creator as well as a content facilitator, in the sense that I'm facilitating content by women for women being put up on the big and the small screen. So I'm really fortunate, and I hope that today's presentation inspires someone out there, you know, to go after their dreams. And like I said in the beginning, in the opening statement, never take no for an answer. It's so easy to get discouraged, especially when you're up against 10 men who think they know it all, and you come prepared, and turns out you know slightly, sometimes, at times, more than they do, but you still get shut down just because you're a woman. Never take no for an answer. Continue to fight the good battle. You got this. I believe in you. Believe in yourself. And yes, I can't wait to see what the future has in store for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ina. And everybody online, thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to do things a little different today. Ina, if it's okay, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Office of Civil Rights Policy and Evaluation Director Stacy Carter to provide opening remarks. We didn't have a lot of chance for questions, but if you all, and Ina, if that's okay, if you all can stick around for maybe 5 minutes, I know time is precious. So if you have a question that you'd like to ask and you want to hang out for a little bit, please feel free to do so. And Stacy, if you, I believe your camera's on. Yes, there we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, for introducing me. And on behalf of Jerry Beat, the Director of the Office of Civil Rights for the Department of Commerce, who couldn't join us today, greetings, and thank you all for attending the program today. Laurie Monk for opening our program today, introducing our speakers, sharing some encouraging affirmations and perspective on women in commerce. Thank you. Lauda Soria, thank you for single-handedly pulling together and producing this awesome event, which amplifies the theme for Women's History Month this year, Women Telling Our Stories. And last but certainly not least, I want to thank you, Ina Petersen, for your enlightening, inspiring presentation. I want to thank you for sharing your lived experiences and some historic firsts for women in media. I have to say what came to mind when I was listening to you was Ruth Carter, who just recently made history, becoming the first Black woman to win 2 Oscars. So your presentation highlights how many untold stories we're missing out on, because as you said, everyone has a story to share, and many stories are about overcoming adversity and achieving in spite of. So that's what makes your message, your perspective, and your company so important. So while you may not have become a tennis star, your light and inner voice are definitely shining brightly in the space you're occupying. Thank you, Ina, for being a champion of women and giving women storytellers a voice. Now, before I go, I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to share a couple of upcoming events. On April 25th, the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility, or DEIA office, will be hosting an employee resource group summit, a first of its kind, department-wide. It's going to be a multi-day event designed to highlight the impact of the 140 or so employee resources groups that we have and how they impact the department. So actually it's for you and by you employees, and I encourage you to reach out to ERG leaders who will have more details. And finally, in May, we will be celebrating and recognizing the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander communities. The theme this year is Advancing Leaders Through Opportunity, and it's a continuation of Advancing Leaders theme series that began in 2021. So be on the lookout for more information about programs and events that are going to take place, both in the department and in the bureaus. Finally, I want to thank you all for joining us today. This concludes the Office of Civil Rights Commemorative Programming for Women's History Month 2023. Until next time, take care.